So we touched on confidentiality and what it means in terms of the CPC. And what I'm trying to do here is to try to explain in depth kind of where the code of professional conduct is coming from. And I'm trying to get you to think about how to apply it and how to think about it because you will have continued education in this. You'll have role playing scenarios. You'll have, as part of sitting for the certification exam, you'll have to answer questions in regards to how would you approach situations. And so my goal behind kind of explaining them the way that I am is I want you to start to think about them differently. And I want you to start to see your work through that lens so that when something comes up on the screen or something comes up in the text, you're already thinking CPC behind it. And that's why I'm taking this time to kind of analyze each. So before moving on to the next one, I wanted to review super quick that we touched only briefly on confidentiality, what it means and how to apply it to any scenario. It is such a complex question. It really is not as simple as just not sharing information. It also is how you talk about things. And so maintaining confidentiality affects the language that you use as an interpreter, as a member of the community, as an employee. And the example that I have here is you'll hear interpreters want to mention their assignments, and maybe it's for a different reason. The example, the team at my Tuesday assignment had a great resource for that. And the example there really is um, using those terms, assignment, the job, not saying, oh, that job I did at Disneyland for that new kitchen worker that they hired. That's just giving it all away. But what's also maintained within that confidential realm is who you worked with, because this field and this world is so small that things could be pieced together by hearing that one nugget of information that shouldn't have been shared. And so, and many times I've been on assignments where maybe I'm the ongoing, or maybe I happened to be there a few times before, and I'll have a team show up, and the team will ask me, who was your team yesterday? And the truth is, you shouldn't ask me that. And I have said to people, oh, you know better than to ask me that. And to some people, they're like, yeah, but who was it anyway? Um, they're very curious as to how it worked out, maybe for other reasons, I think not related to the CPC, but just you all have to know that this field is so competitive. You're going to find this in your education as you move forward, especially more deeply in your interpreter program. It is very highly competitive. I don't know why. We really should be more supportive of each other. When I find a team that supports me and I want to be that team that's supportive back, I hold on to them, and that's who I want to work with. Nonetheless, back to this point is when someone is asking who was your team before, they're really asking who got this job? Why'd they get it? Why didn't I get it? Well, there's so many more questions that they're asking outside of even who is the deaf person that just for your own sake, you're going to want to stay within those boundaries because there's just no need to get into that. The other thing is that you'll hear interpreters refer to consumers as the client or the consumer. Sometimes the client is really the paying entity, but those will interchange. I want to add here that be careful of using possessive language. I hear interpreters say, my student, my client, my class. None of those are yours. You can be pulled from that class at any moment. And who is it, your class or is it your team's class? Are you are you the teacher? Your student? Are you teaching them? We're privileged to be someone who can participate in the education of someone, in someone's appointment, in someone's situation, whatever it may be. And we're just there to facilitate communication. It is not my class. It is not my student. That's not my professor. And so I'm very careful of using that possessive language, including when I was coordinating services. I never referred to the interpreters as my interpreters. They're not mine. They're every, they're their own independent, free-thinking person. And so if I call them mine, then are all their errors mine too? And all their successes, do I own them? I just wanted to put that for your thought because I don't like when someone uses possessive language about me either. Because I am my own free thinking, independent person with my own opinions and sometimes I'll make mistakes and sometimes I knowingly make a mistake thinking, well, I'm gonna risk it. Those are mine that I'm owning because I'll accept the consequences. So something to think about confidentiality is the language that we use, and that ties directly to professionalism because as a professional person, a professional, be it attorney, instructor, accountant, manager, but also interpreter, the language that you use reflects your professionalism. And so these two are connected because the language that you use to maintain confidentiality is what reflects your professionalism as well. So this video, we're going to discuss tenet number 2, professionalism. And so a question that I want to ask you is, at the beginning of the tenet, you'll see it says interpreters possess professional skills and knowledge required for specific interpreting situation. That's what the tenet is exactly. But I want to ask you to ask yourself, what does professionalism mean in the field of interpreting? And how do you know if you have the right skills to fit an assignment? Like, especially being a newer interpreter, how do you know if you're ready to accept a challenge, a healthy challenge, versus challenge that's not even up your alley or even at your level? And how does this connect? I just connected it in the earlier slide, is that professionalism connects to confidentiality in the language that we use. But that's also part of our behavior, part of our following the code of professional conduct and following the tenet of confidentiality and professionalism is connected. They're, you can't separate one from the two. And so how do you know who's doing what? That's really the question, right? So here are the tenets again, and I've put into bold print the one that we're going to focus on now. And again, I want you to think about, I feel like in general, I have a picture in my mind of what a professional interpreter looks like. I have a intuitive sense when I meet someone, kind of I do a little judge a book by its cover. You're dressed professionally, you walk the talk. Okay, cool. And then I see you work and I'm seeing the whole picture, I think, of professionalism. But if I had to describe in a few words what it meant to me, I think I might be stuck because it means so much more than I can explain because I see it. But that's why we're talking about it, because we have to try to articulate what it means so that we can understand it. And basically, I'm telling you, I'm on the same page, right? So you know that I like to always agree on what we mean with terminology because I feel like that's such a really, really great place to start. And with professionalism, I want to ask you what professionalism means to you. And so I've got a few pictures on the slide because in the first picture, respect, ethics, integrity, and honesty. So does someone who holds all those as values and follows those as part of their process of doing business or part of their professional life, if they uphold to those standards, does that make them professional? Is that what professionalism means? What if they have respect for the consumer but not their team? Or the other way around, they have respect for their team but not the consumer. Does that mean that they're not professional? Does that mean that that changes the definition of what they hold? And the other question is, does it make someone professional by the way they show up, the way they're dressed? And does someone who continue to always grow and develop in the field and stay up to date with current changes in the language and changes in philosophy and mindsets and just with the the tone of the climate of what's happening in the field and in the world, does that make somebody professional? Is it all of it or is it just some of it? But the other thing to consider is if these are the values that you hold and you show up to an assignment and a person who is like me, who's kind of like, yeah, I'm vibing that you're a professional off just judging a book from its cover. Me, that person, do I have to agree with all these things? Do I have to agree with your definition of professionalism for me to gauge you as professional? Or are there certain standards that are just kind of accepted in the field, or maybe accepted as part of American culture as being professional that we can't shy away from? Uh, it's a really complex question because if I think I'm being professional, does that mean I am viewed as professional? So I'm going to tell you a story about I was interpreting an AA, Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I was actually a pretty regular interpreter, but there was one meeting where the consumer wasn't showing up. Now, with interpreting, you get a 24-hour cancellation, and if nobody shows up, you still get paid. With AA, because they're their own kind of entity and they collect money, what the way they paid the interpreter is that they did a collection in the meeting, counted up some money for the interpreter, and then at the end of the meeting, they'd give it to you in cash. Um, and I had been going a few weeks already, and I was starting to feel bad that I'm sitting there, there's no consumer, and then I didn't want to leave. Part of my own professional boundary was I don't want to cause any distraction and leave in the middle of the meeting. So I'd always wait until a natural break or they'd have a coffee break and then resume or do their fellowship. So I'd always wait. There's there's sometimes where you could leave an assignment and you don't have to wait the whole time, but in this particular case, it was just less distracting that I just wait. It was just an hour meeting, so it's not a big deal. And one of the last times that I was there, I wanted to sneak out. I felt really bad about accepting their money, even though that's a standard in my field to charge for services, and I should want the money. I should want to charge for the services. I arrived there, I showed up ready to work, but there are guys who didn't show up. But I felt bad. I don't know if I felt bad because they were collecting the money and giving it to me or because it'd been so many times and they didn't cancel me. I just didn't I just didn't like the way it felt. But when I was trying to sneak away, the treasurer stopped me and said, "Don't forget your money." And I said, "Oh, I expressed to them how bad I felt, and they said, "That's not your place. We do this collection as part of our development and our growth, and we need to pay you. And you've agreed to accept this money. You have agreed to come show up to this assignment, and you can't do that to us. You can't not accept our money because now you're affecting our growth and our own treatment." There's maybe a better word for that, but that's what it came out. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks because I realized I'd never seen the other side. And if I had snuck out of there, I would have ended up doing some harm. And as a ethical interpreter, that's not something that's within my guidelines. And so I was a little bit humbled by that. And I have to tell you, it did get a little difficult because there were a few more meetings different than that one where there wasn't a consumer, and for some reason it became hard for me to keep showing up, even though I understood their perspective, and so I stopped. I can't say that that's the only reason I stopped. It was so long ago, but I did stop because it didn't fit within my own values, and maybe it was because I'm not someone who goes to AA, but that's a story about professionalism, but not just professionalism, but the consideration of the perspective of the other person that we may be missing. And that's the point here of professionalism. And a second thing that I want to mention about this is that I feel that interpreter training programs they're missing a couple things. But one thing that they're missing is, as a person who at one point hired and coordinated services. I hired interpreters, coordinated services, dealt with schedules, time cards, etc. I found that interpreters didn't know how to be an employee and be an interpreter. They only knew how to be an interpreter. It's like so limited. Their field of vision was so limited. And you got to be the whole package. Whenever I found interpreters who were the whole package, and what do I mean by the whole package? I mean, you're professional, you got the skill, but you got soft skills too. You you treat not just the deaf consumer as your client, but the hearing person too. You treat everyone in the room as your client. And there's a lack of customer service. There's a lack of awareness of how to manage situations. And a big part of that was definitely professionalism. We had some big problems that every time I thought, how did this even happen? And I look into how did this happen? Someone stepped out of their role. Someone didn't have any boundaries, and either it caused a problem then, or it became a ripple effect, and we found it later. And that's the thing about following the CPC. When you do not follow the code of professional conduct, you might get away with it. You might be fine. Nobody may call you on it. You may continue to work. You're not going to lose work. You're not going to hurt. But you have made it difficult on that next interpreter who shows up to that assignment. That next interpreter that paid entity is exposed to, the next deaf person that has an expectation of the interpreter, and maybe the next one is following the CPC. And now they're like, Why are you not willing to do A, B, and C? Guess what? The deaf person doesn't have to go to school to learn the CPC, but we do. So there isn't this nuanced understanding often of what our role is. And so it really is our role to model it, to follow it, and to have a really deep understanding of it. One last thing is one picture I didn't add is attitude. Is attitude part of being professional? Like if you show up grumpy, are you a professional interpreter? Versus what about if you're overly excited and happy and not really matching the tone? Another thing on a professional attire is the standard uh, attire for interpreters is business casual, which is not quite a suit, but like a cardigan and slacks and a blouse. That's that's the standard, but you're always supposed to adjust to the situation. I have a situation right now that I'm an ongoing interpreter for, and they it's in a medical office, but they don't wear scrubs. So everyone's kind of dressed and I'm trying to be, of course, confidential. Everyone dresses, they're counselors, we'll call them counselors, and they dress not quite business casual. They're like just under business casual. And so I've kind of toned it down on my own dress, and we walk a lot, so I've got some dark um like sneakers, but they're all solid colors so you can so they look professional to me. Um but I had to tone it down because my job is twofold. One is to be readily identifiable as an interpreter, and and that includes that interpreting is such a new field, and we've been fighting for recognition as professionals and pay as professionals for some time. And so part of our responsibility in showing up dressed like a professional is also to show, yes, I'm a paid person. You'd be surprised how many people ask if you're a volunteer. And I used to be snarky and say, "Are you a volunteer?" But okay, that's not professional. Um, so part of my consideration is I still have to stand out as a professional working person, so I'm not completely laid back. But I also can't be overdressed. I can't be dressed in a full suit like that picture to work with a counselor who's not dressed that way. So you can't be overdressed and you can't be underdressed. So reading the room is really important with the way that you dress um, for assignments. I'll tell you that I have one rule. This is a self-imposed rule, but sometimes I get an assignment and it'll say jeans okay. Occasionally there's going to be a lot of walking or there's been hiking. And unless it truly is hiking, my self-imposed rule is I won't wear jeans. The reason is that um, no matter, like, either I'm going to get super baggy jeans where I look like a construction worker, or my jeans are going to be a slim fit and I just have too much going on. um, and I feel that when they say wear jeans, they don't really mean for me to wear jeans. I hope you guys are laughing. Um, so I never wear jeans. It's a self-imposed rule, but I realize that that's the perspective of the other side. They're not going to get that. So I'm not going to wear super baggy construction person jeans, and I'm not going to wear slim fit, super slim fit, show you my assets jeans. So I just don't wear jeans. Um, I have in recent years kind of tested a couple like black solid jeans, and I did have an assignment one time at a warehouse where jeans were required, like because of the equipment, and I did wear it for that, and I felt like we had so much personal protective gear that it didn't matter. But the other thing that I consider with wearing jeans is I'm a freelancer, which means I go from job to job, And my next job that might be be it a classroom or in an office, they're not going to know that the job before them told me it's okay to wear jeans and maybe steel-toed boots or hiking shoes. So they're going to judge me based on how I show up, not based on, oh, she had this other job where she was allowed to wear jeans or told to wear jeans because it was required for a warehouse. And because I want to be available to work other jobs, and that's the way I've defined my work is to be a freelancer. We'll talk about defining our work. I'm going to make a note of that. But because I've defined my work as that person, I can't wear jeans. I got to be ready for the next job because they don't know. So that's all this. Like I just took this whole time to ask you what this word means, and then the second question is, does it mean the same to the person who you're working for or working with? That is so complex. So I'm going to give you a second to look at that. So very clearly, the interpreter for the Mandela Memorial was not a professional, not following the CPC. But why I put that headline there is you don't want to be that guy. Even if you are a trained interpreter, your responsibility is to know your skill set. And if someone sends you an email saying, hey, can you cover this? We can see it today with so many press conferences. Can you cover this press conference? It's not the agency. I mean, they should ethically be looking for the right fit. But really, it's not on them, it's on you. It's your responsibility to think, ooh, I know you emailed me. I'm not there yet. It's your responsibility to say, I'm at that level. And, or even when it's a healthy challenge to take, who's going to be the team? I feel comfortable with them. They'll support me. No one else can take this. I'll step up. This is a time for that healthy challenge. You're, you have now signed up for lifelong learning in the field that you've decided to pursue. And it's not unique to this. Doctors do continuing education, accountants do continuing education, professionals in general maintain some kind of standard of continuing education. So you will always be learning and staying up to date. You've just signed up for that. I learn all the time. I'm taking webinars and courses. I can't teach you in a way that's up to the standards and up to date with the field if I wasn't still engaged in the practice of interpreting. So side note for any other professors that you take, I've always thought that that is so important in whatever subject. It's really important to learn from someone who's still practicing because things change. So you've just signed up for lifelong learning, but you've also signed up for a lifelong um, self analysis. You've just agreed to always do some self analysis. We should always do that in our personal lives for our personal reasons. But speaking professionally, we should always be looking at our work, watching our team, stealing. I steal from everyone's tricks all the time. Like, I like how you did that in my bag of tricks because I'm going to continue to use it. I'm always learning, even from newer interpreters. I never ever think there's no possible way I could know the best and only way to sign things. But that's your job now. You have a responsibility to accept work based on skill and expertise, and the only way that you can know where you're at. Continued self analysis, being honest with yourself, and to do continuing education, lifelong learning. So I'm going to give you a second to see this, and this is also on it's part of the tenets. I just can't paste from there. Super quick, why I wanted to touch on each of these is just to kind of give you a droplet of what each means. 2.1, we can't deny service. You might say, yeah, I prefer not to work with so and so. I prefer not to work with that person. We'll consider it. Um, but unless there's a really big reason, you cannot deny service to someone um, on the basis of discrimination. And I have another story to tell. I like telling stories. So I'm really telling it to myself because I'm recording this, but I hope you guys hear it the way I'm telling it. But when I was first interpreting, I worked at a college and we had this ongoing thing where at that time, if you were an interpreter at night, the offices were closed. And so if you had a no-show or cancellation, you had to go check in with a different office or check a binder and then kind of check that everyone is okay before you left campus. And so uh, me and my team, we were interpreting in a class where the student kept making really, I want to say, kind of disgusting, kind of rude, borderline disgusting, rude remarks as we interpreted. He was just rude and mean and sexist, and I didn't like him. But we interpreted. Every time he did it, wouldn't show any emotion, reported it to the coordinator. And then one night, me and the same team had a different class that had a no-show. And we were leaving campus. And again, so we had this understanding that before you leave campus, you make sure that everyone's okay and then you leave. And he saw us on our way out and he stopped us and he said, no interpreter showed up to my class. Can you come with me? And I was like, I was uncomfortable. I really wanted to go home, but I was uncomfortable thinking, but you're the guy that's rude and gross and mean to me and sexist, and you want me to do you a favor? Seriously? I didn't say any of that, by the way. And the team was feeling the same thing, and we're both like, well, did you make a request? And does the coordinator know? And we have to get permission. And we kind of weaseled our way out of it. Unfortunately, big mistake. I regret it. Absolutely. So he went to class. I don't know if he ended up finding a different interpreter or if he left class. I don't know his story, but we left. He went that way, we went that to the parking. The next day, we both called the coordinator and told the coordinator what had happened. So it was some kind of error or last minute thing he tried to do. So he didn't have an interpreter because maybe he requested too much of last minute. Nonetheless, as we were explaining to the coordinator, she said, well, you didn't do the wrong thing. He didn't really request, we didn't really have him set up for services, so it wasn't wrong. And then she said this. She said, but I want to remind you that we we're here to serve deaf students, whether it's your favorite student or your not so favorite student. And she said, I just want to ask you to think about how you would have responded if the person asking you was your favorite student and not that student. And would you still have left campus? She didn't want a response because she completely, like, that was like dropping the mic totally. And yeah, I suck. because how I would have responded to my favorite student is I would have said, absolutely, I'll go with you. We'll figure it out tomorrow. We happen to have been canceled. You happen to have a class that's in session. Yeah, I'm on paid time. I'll go. We'll figure it out another day. So since then, and that was very, very early in my career, and I'm really glad that it happened very early because since then, I use that as the model to respond, whether I respond to you guys as students, to interpreters that I'm managing, to clients I'm working with. I want to be snooty sometimes. I want to be like annoyed and I want to be snarky, but I fight it because I ask myself, is this how you would respond to your favorite student, your favorite person, your favorite interpreter, your favorite client, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? No, Arlene, it's not. And then I respond because P.S. I'm human, so I guess a good time as any to apologize now if I sent you a snarky email. Um, I was really trying not to, but if it came across as snarky, it wasn't snarky. It's also text, by the way. Okay, 2.2. Assess consumer needs and the interpreting situation before and during the assignment. Make adjustments. What does that mean? Is, well, as you may have learned already, that as an interpreter, you should try to get a gauge of what the consumer's assigning needs are. Do they need mouthing? I know interpreters who refuse to mouth. I'll tell you, I'm a really excellent transliterator. That is my skill. I can transliterate like nobody's business. But that's not what everybody needs. So I need to adjust. And for those of you who have seen on the press conferences, I'm not transliterating because I know that that's not the audience that's watching. And my job is to know that and to adjust for that. And if you see my earlier work on those press conferences, uh, it took me some time to adjust because I'm not, uh, it sounds weird, I'm not an interpreter because there's interpreting ASL and transliterating. My go-to thing is always transliterating. I don't do ASL often. And so I've had to adjust slowly in order to get up to speed and to match what they expect the audience who's watching to be. That's our job. And so with that, I want to say is while your program is heavily focused on signing ASL, that is so that you can have a foundation. You need a really strong foundation to be able to play with the language and to be able to shift and add nuance and meaning and depth. But the reality of your work is if you work in a community college setting, you're probably going to be doing a lot of English, a lot of transliterating, and you have to know the range. So don't feel bad, even though your professors may be like, don't sign that way, but take it as another tool in your toolbox because you need it. You need to be able to sign both ASL and English. You got to be able to mouth, drop the mouthing, got to be able to do a lot of expression, drop it, etc. It's got to be all part of the adjustments that you have to make. So 2.3. This is part of what we talked about, the subtext of communicating information. It's also understanding, as you'll see in your English skills development book, I think it's in Unit 2, where they mention implicit and explicit messages. And so our job is to really make information understood. But this is the really important balance that we have to have. The information has to be understood without stealing a moment from that deaf person to have that aha moment or to connect with the hearing people in that situation. So what does that mean? Sometimes a professor says, for example, in my earlier slide, what does professionalism mean? Does it mean blah blah blah? As an interpreter, you might be like, she means ambiency. But our job is not to teach or to give the answers. Our job is to let that that moment happen with the intention that it had, and for everyone to have this similar experience. And so many times, uh, an interpreter sometimes will correct me because maybe I fingerspell something, but I'm interpreting with intention. I'm fingerspelling it because this is how it's coming. And just sometimes I want to say, just watch. Genius is about to happen here. I'm doing this with intention. And that's what I want you guys to do. Interpret with intention. So have in mind the goal of the speaker, because even though we know the answer, going back to the example of, are you sure you want to turn this in? That subtext, the implicit message in there is take a second look. And so our job is very delicate because, and some of you answered to use facial expression in my question that I posed, which is true, but is that enough? That's the question. And that's your job, is to gauge the response of the consumer. Got it? Back off. Don't got it? Keep going. You're always watching because you don't want to steal the moment from them, but you also don't want them to lose the moment as well. And so that's part of how we render that message faithfully. It's really complex. We will talk about requesting support, but this means really, when do you need a deaf interpreter? When do you need a team? As new interpreters, a lot of places are going to ask you, can't you do this solo? Can't you just this one time? Ethically, you are bound to request a team as needed. And it's not about, can you do this solo? You probably can, but you can't do a 3 hour job solo if it requires a team and be accurate, maintain accuracy. You lose information the more fatigued you become. You drop information the more fatigued you become. You start to lose your pace. You can always see an interpreter that's fatigued. You can see it in their work, and the clients can see it in their work. I hate when someone says, "Are you tired?" Because what I hear is from a consumer, if I hear, "Are you tired?" I hear, "I'm not putting out good work." I must be missing something because you can tell I'm tired. Um, I really hate that comment. So for my part, what I do, I don't want to show up tired. I don't, if I have a really important job, I really do my best to get good rest because I always say to myself and to my family, my job is to pay attention. So I can't show up like disheveled and barely waking up. That's part of my job. And so with you, I say the main thing that will come up is people often want you to do jobs by yourself. And I think that newer interpreters are taken advantage of in that way because that you will be asked. Now sometimes people are asking, can you handle this solo? I'm still looking for a team. And what they're really asking is, maybe that day there's downtime, maybe if it's a classroom, it's a test that day, and they're really asking from a place of support. But if they aren't, that's where you need to kind of keep your eyes open because you need to ask yourself, do I want to be an interpreter a short time and get cut off by injury, or do I want to be an interpreter a long time? and take care of myself. Part of ethical behavior is to take care of yourself and only do what you need. The world is not going to end if you cannot do an assignment by yourself. And I say that to myself too. Very recently, actually, for me, it happened. It happens all the time, but it very recently, I thought I'm really exhausted. I could, and somebody was asking me, "Can you please come cover this?" And I was like, "Do you have a team?" And they didn't. And I might have on a good day done it, but I was too tired. And unfortunately, they ended up with no interpreter, but I was I was too tired to have anything to give, and I would have hurt myself if I had accepted an assignment. Of course I feel awful. But the other thing is you can't put the weight on me of your job. A entity, an organization, institution has a responsibility to provide service, and service doesn't always mean just the one person. Their job is to find a pool. So don't take that as the responsibility that you hold either. Even though entities and hiring entities, institutions, agencies, they're going to try to put it on you. It's not on you. 2.6, we are finding, I feel that uh, consumers more and more look to the interpreter as a resource of information. And one example that I have for you is if you're an employee of, let's say, a school, you should know what the school offers. Because as an employee and representative of that school's disabled students office, you should really be able to say, "Oh, is that your question? You should really go to the counseling office." Or you should really go to the EOPS office. Or you should go to this office because they have this service. And maybe you don't provide it in depth because, after all, you're not a counselor. You're not a representative of any of those other offices. But you should be aware of the services provided, especially of the place where you're working, because again, you're not that limited vision of I'm only an interpreter, but you're a fountain of information and you're a resource. And you're the person that signs that works at this college or this school or this organization. And so you should have information to at least pass on so that the consumer can find their own. And so with professionalism, what we really have to consider is that our role, in a nutshell, is to facilitate communication, to provide equal access, and really often to educate on the role of the interpreter. It is not our job to take an opportunity away from a consumer, that it's our job to make sure they grab it. Example, when someone asks the interpreter, "How do you sign milk?" I often redirect, "How do you sign," and I fingerspell it. Why do I fingerspell it? It's not going to catch it from me. That's your chance. It's not my language. It's their chance to grab it and make that connection. And the deaf person could either be like, "Yeah, this is how you sign milk," or be like, "Leave me alone, buddy. I get that question all the time." Completely their choice to take it or leave it, but not mine in the slightest to take it or leave it. Again, I'm just there to facilitate the communication, not to steal those opportunities or those moments. I'm actually there to ensure that those moments happen and not to steal them. So beware of being asked to participate, even in the slightest way. Sometimes an interpreter says, I can't participate in this," but "I can't participate" also means you can't ask me questions while I'm on. Don't ask me how to sign X, Y, and Z. I'm just I'm just the conduit for the communication. So what happens when an interpreter doesn't sign or doesn't follow the CPC? This is what I want to leave you with. You can do a million good things and people will remember the one time that you made them feel awful. For some reason, people remember those bad memories. So part of being professional is your reputation. I would say that my reputation is the most valuable thing I hold, aside from certification in the interpreting field. And it's something that in my own program they instilled in us how valuable it was, but I didn't really see the value until several years in. Your reputation starts today. As I said in a previous video, you got to be approachable, you got to be friendly, you got to be professional, you got to be already with the interpreter mindset starting now. So if you have sticky relationships with your classmates, fix it. If you've got uncertainty, fix it. I have set my own rules of behavior. I just follow kind of my own code, and I always think to myself, if I have a problem with someone, it's really their problem because I'm not going to back out of a job because they're my team. I'm not going to lose out in any way because the person I don't like is going to be the team in that. I'll be respectful. We might not have lunch together, but I'll be respectful. And I'll let them know that I don't like them in a different way, not while we're working. Um, while we're working, I always try to be as professional as possible because that's what people remember. They remember they remember the way you make them feel. And if making them feel awful happens, that's the one that stays with them. They completely forget about all the million times that you were a good person. It just how life happens. So think about the interpreter that you want to be. And what I'm really getting at is think about, I've said this before in another video, when your name comes up, what do you want people to associate that with? Wow, always on time, always professional. What a great, beautiful skill. Or always, wow, snooty, snarky, bad attitude. You can't ask a question. They laugh at you or they giggle, making you feel like you're nothing. Which one do you want to be? Do you want to be the approachable one or do you want to be the intimidating one? Because now's the time to build it. And if you have it, now's the time to create it. So some quick questions. I'll give you a second to read it. So don't think about other students or about what has happened in the past or about any other situation. This is just a you situation. You are now a student of interpreting, and now you know better. Not only that, you now adhere to the Code of Professional Conduct. A deaf student who is your friend asks you to interpret a one-on-one with the professor. And you want to help because you want to be a good friend and you feel like you understand each other. But the answer is don't do it. You know better now. Not only do you know better, but you have a code of professional conduct that tells you you are not a trained interpreter. This is not a good idea. The other thing that you need to consider is that as an interpreter, there's responsibilities that you hold that are part of your employer duties. So you don't know what those rules are, and you don't know what the history is there, or why didn't the student request an interpreter? You want to always maintain those boundaries. I'm your friend now, and now I'm an interpreter. And what you're building now is that skill to delineate between when you're an interpreter and when you're someone's friend. Because absolutely that's going to happen. It's a small world. But right now, you do not have a full understanding of what that situation can lead to and the consequences. But what you do have an understanding is that you cannot provide that service because ethically, you know that you're bound not to. Your ethical responsibility is to say, I'm not an interpreter yet. The second question is, an experienced interpreter asks you to work with them. They know your skill level, they know your schema for that topic and assignment, and you feel like you have a good relationship with them. So do you do it? Yes, because, well, if they're professional. An experienced interpreter is asking you because they know what you can do. They're asking you because they know this fits. And so you have to have a little bit of trust and confidence in them that they would not have been asking you otherwise. It doesn't mean don't ask questions. Maybe you still say, are you sure? What makes you think I can? Have that conversation. But absolutely, that's the best thing. That's the best time to do it because someone has offered you something that's already at your level. And so it's a little bit it should be a little bit less intimidating than if it was just some random job posting. So that concludes a very long video on professionalism, and we will be focusing on number 3, conduct, for the next video. Thanks.